Joe Biden, the 78-year-old president of the United States, recently got a third COVID vaccine, and the Israeli chief COVID officer says we need 4 doses per person. Meanwhile, there are over 50 countries with fewer than one vaccine dose for every 5 people, and at the very bottom, the DRC, Haiti, Tanzania, Turkmenistan, and Chad have administered fewer than 1 dose per every 100 people. Looking at a map, we can clearly see there's imbalance. Why is this the case? Well, obviously, it's all about money. But just how much money do you need to vaccinate your entire country? Let's look at the data to find out. It's plainly obvious that rich countries will get more vaccine doses than poor countries. For one, pharmaceutical companies are capitalist entities. They want to take their publicly funded R&D and maximize profits for their private shareholders. That's kind of the whole point of capitalism, so I guess we can't fault them that much. Secondly, Western democratic politicians care about votes, and, for example, unvaccinated Haitians can't vote in a U.S. election. Hence, there's really no incentive to be magnanimous towards them or anyone else, barring any geopolitical strategic importance. In the end, what matters is how much money your country has to pay off the pharmaceutical companies. To understand this cost, we'll compare GDP per capita collected online from Worldometer to the current number of vaccine doses administered per 100 people, which was collected on 26 September from Our World in Data. This is a fascinating data set because on one hand, more money means more vaccines until, that is, you approach the soft upper bound of 1 to 2 doses per person. Even vaccine-happy Israel administered fewer than 2 doses per person. Hence, the statistical modeling is going to be done in 2 pieces. We can look at data on both the absolute and the log-log scale. Statistically speaking, the magic number is $11,600 per capita. Any further increase in GDP per capita does not significantly affect the number of vaccines administered. On average, these richer countries have administered about 1 dose per person, and this accounts for the top 32% of countries in the world. And here they are on a map. For the lower 68% of the world, the number of vaccine doses follows a very simple linear model. For every additional, say, $120 of GDP per capita, you get 1 dose to share among about 100 people. Strictly speaking, this is a log-log transformed linear model, so the number of vaccine doses increases proportionally to GDP to the power of 1.04. Hence, the growth rate is slightly faster than linear, but ultimately, more money means more vaccines. However, going beyond the model, we can look for regional differences by adjusting for GDP per capita. The R package I'm using splits the world into 11 different subregions. Those regions are North America, Latin America plus the Caribbean, Western Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, former Soviet states, Central Asia plus China, South Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, for some reason all grouped together, all other Pacific islands, Middle East and North Africa, and lastly, Sub-Saharan Africa. A Post-Hoc Tukey Test can tell us if any regions have disproportionately more or fewer vaccine doses than others. The result is every region is roughly comparable except Sub-Saharan Africa, which is uniformly worse off than every other region on Earth. Ex-Soviet states have administered roughly 5 times more vaccine doses than Sub-Saharan African countries. Pacific Islands, South Asia, and the Middle East have administered 7 times more doses. Latin America and Eastern Europe, 9 to 10 times more doses. China et al., 14 times more. Australia, New Zealand, Japan, nearly 17 times more. And at the very top of the world, North America and Western Europe, who have administered about 20 times more vaccine doses per capita than Sub-Saharan African countries. After adjusting for GDP, we notice that China plus Central Asia and South Asian countries have higher vaccine rates than their GDP would suggest. Presumably, this is due largely to China pumping out its own vaccines, even given lower GDPs on average. On the other side, Sub-Saharan Africa and Central and Eastern Europe have lower vaccine rates than their GDP would suggest. This means that sub-Saharan African nations have fewer doses to go around than other countries in other regions with comparable GDP per capita. So in conclusion, the data is really depressing. So how do we fix this? Well, I'm neither a political strategist nor an economist, but I have 3 ideas. 1, if poor nations got more money somehow, they could pay the high cost charged by these pharmaceutical companies. 2, if nations were to gain geopolitical significance, maybe find some oil reserves, get a few nukes, then countries may be nicer to them. And 3, perhaps big pharma and rich countries could just be nice and share vaccine doses? It could happen, I guess. Oh, or we could waive patent rights for vaccines and then anyone could just make them. But, of course, Bill Gates has already pointed out that other countries aren't smart enough to make vaccines, so oh well.